And welcome back to Geek Life, your source for all the nerdy news you need to know. And tonight we've got a deep dive for you guys. The reopening of the world has proven to be more profitable for some than others, and while Hollywood tries to con us back into the theaters, the difference is becoming stark. And while Spider-Man No Way Home broke records to become the third largest worldwide debut with 600 million, just behind the MCU faves Avengers Infinity War at 640 million, and Avengers Endgame with 1.2 billion, each opening in China openings in China that No Way Home has yet to source. With the biggest opening in Sony history and the biggest December debut of all time, it's easy to assume the movie industry's comeback is making big waves, but not for every type of movie. And that's what we're going to talk about in tonight's deep dive. So, without further ado, Dilly the Doodle Dandy Doodle Dandy. All right. So it is easy to assume that the movie comeback is making big waves, but that assumption would be dead wrong. As critically acclaimed and largely anticipated, West Side Story barely topped $10 million in openings this past weekend with its $100 million budget. The poor showings caused waves amongst Hollywood's execs as they scrambled to replan and rework releases. Within 24 hours, J-Lo and Owen Wilson's rom-com Marry Me was moved to a digital co-release for upcoming weekend, and a slew of other non-comic based movies pulled from their release dates due to a lot later times with reworks on marketing campaigns. Hollywood has traditionally relied on the the over 35 female audience to bring in the big bucks, hence the push for stereotypically older femme movies like rom-coms and musicals. Initial reports put a more COVID-conscious consumer to blame for poor showings in these films, but later numbers have proven that a demographic did show up. They went to Spider-Man instead. So, do you think it's fair or even correct to blame older female audience for poor showings in West Side Story, Littlest Nelly?
No, I have so many opinions on this. I get that they really, really wanted to bring the audience back in, but I think people are just really, I think that they just don't get the market. Like, I'm not over 35 and I'm non-binary, but I'm pretty feminine and I do like rom-coms. But that's not really what's going to draw me into theaters. I want, especially if I'm going to spend as much money as a movie ticket costs nowadays, like I want to know that I'm going to get something good out of it. And I feel like most of the movies that are coming out that aren't really Marvel movies are just these huge gambles. Like I can't depend on that being 20 bucks well spent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that if you're gonna risk it for the biscuit, you're gonna figure out which one is worth your time to do it. And I think a lot of people were deciding this weekend, or it was either Matrix or Spider-Man. I think that those were the two ones that really had a juggle for there. And then the reason Spider-Man snowballed after there was everyone was coming out of that movie saying it lives up to the hype, and that sells tickets for the next person behind them. What do you think really caused the flop of such a highly anticipated movie such as West Side Story, Kev?
I think people stopped going to the movie theaters a long time ago. Compound that with COVID and people not needing a big reason to go to the movie theaters anymore, considering that they just have all forms of content and entertainment at their fingertips. Keep them entertained. They don't have to wait in lieu of a big blockbuster movie or a film that they want to really see come out. They'll just wait a couple months, watch a few things here and there, and be like, boom, West Side Story is now on HBO Max. So I think that's kind of like the thing, right? Where it's like, the only reason I saw Spider-Man in theaters is because it was fucking Spider-Man. And also had somebody to go with. So I think that's the other thing too, right? It's like, one, people don't like, I mean, myself aside, I would go to a movie theater by myself, but for the most part, majority of people don't go to movie theaters by themselves. So having to go to a movie theater, convince other people to go to the movie theater with you in a pandemic is kind of a stretch. Especially for like what Nelly was saying is kind of a risk now. Is this going to be worth my $20 and my lungs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that. We gave Spider-Man. I gave Spider-Man a 4.75. You guys are giving it 4.5. I think this is a really classic movie. I think this is a movie that's going to stand out in the Marvel franchise. I think this is a movie that's going to be
Yeah.
a movie that people are going to talk about for several years to come. And I think that it's unfair to really create a lot of comparisons when you're competing against that. I think like there was a lot of really great movies that came out right around the time of the Avengers, the first Avengers movies. Sorry, the first Avenger Affinity movies, like where the real big ones. And I think it was really hard um, to really accurately judge how good those movies were based off of box office sales. And I think that it's one of the arguments that I think goes to prove again that this is not the best metric of measuring the success for these films. Now, with that said, there's another big point here. Do you think Hollywood is trying to ignore Ansel Elgort's sexual assault allegations, or the fact that those allegations just didn't sit right with audiences, Littlest Nelly?
I think this one's a weird one for me because, on the one hand, I felt very much like West Side Story was trying to kind of like pander to the female audience in the way that it marketed itself. Ansel Elgort had previously been kind of known as a heartthrob, but almost as soon as all of those allegations came out, I felt like the marketing all but stopped, right? But at the same time, Netflix had their release of their musical number, which I can't remember the name of, with Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield, which is an audience people were dying to see anyway with the rise of Spider-Man. And so I think that they kind of tried to lay underneath the radar, and the people who knew about it were probably very, very few. I don't remember this being like a huge uproar that people talked about in the media.
Yeah, I don't think this is something that even resonated with me when it came to this movie. This movie flew under my radar for a lot of different reasons. One is, I haven't seen West Side Story, and I'm not too familiar with it in its eminence of itself. So this would probably be a good time for me to be introduced to it. But like, it's competing with such highly anticipated movies that have been building up for centuries. And I think that honestly, you really have to also dissect the uniqueness of No Way Home's marketing campaign there. They had big actors basically telling people no, they're not in the movie up until the release of the movie. They really wanted to keep their secrets. And that's a huge challenge, to be able to get past. And I think that they, these campaigns and the way that they market this movie should be analyzed and looked at for other movies for years to come to emulate how to successfully mark a movie. And I think that there was absolutely no room in the attention span for any other movies on the radar, especially something like West Side Stories. And I don't think that really the sexual assault allegations, I didn't really know about them until well after the movie was out, and people were complaining, well, was this the real factor that was going there? I was like, no, no one was really interested in this compared to Spider-Man. Could the shift in super movie demographics show that Hollywood is out of touch? Are they still looking at comics from the 80s lens, Kev?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit a mix of both, right? Because my thing is I'm trying to think of who the demographic would be here, and it's either one, people who've already seen West Side Story, the original one, so then it's like, okay, they're probably thinking, why would I go see this movie again or redone? And then two, maybe it's just people who are really into musicals, which again, unless it's like, and West Side Story is certainly one that is heralded as like one of the classic musicals, but you gotta look like, if it's not done by Lin-Manuel Miranda, I'm sorry, there's not a lot of real estate for you to succeed there in today's sort of movie-going client audience, I guess. So I think it's kind of a mix of a few different parts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Littlest Nelly, same question. Do the shift in movie demographics show that Hollywood's out of touch?
I think so. I think that, you have to remember that this West Side Story wasn't just like a movie that they put out and said, let's get people into theaters and make money. They spent $100 million on their budget just making the movie, not including everything else around the movie. Like, they really, really thought that this was going to bring people out. Steven Spielberg directed it. It had really, really big names, a huge budget. They did market it very, very widely in the beginning. It kind of died down with allegations, but I think that they genuinely thought that this was going to be a movie that brought people out, because when you look at things like Spider-Man, right, one of the things that we said is that it's familiar. It's something that we know is going to be good, and that we're willing to take a risk on. I think that that's why they did that, took that monetary risk with a remake of a musical, right? West Side Story is one of like the most critically acclaimed films in history, as a musical, as a film, the whole thing. And I think that they really thought that this was going to bring it out, and I think that they just missed the mark. I don't think that the female over 35 audience that they keep saying is exclusively going to rom-coms and musicals anymore. I think that audience is going to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So. True. That's very, very true. And more importantly, Lewis Nelly, though, are these numbers proof that the new nerd that the incels are so afraid of is here, exists?
Yes, the demographics, I wish that I had all of the exact numbers in front of me. The largest single group demographic, right, not necessarily over 50% of who was in theaters, but the largest single group was in fact over 35 females who went to go see Spider-Man. They were the biggest buying power to watch that movie, which is definitely what the Dorito Dusters are terrified of happening. So it's over, guys. You're done. That's it. You're not nerds anymore.
Yep. What do you think, Kev? Is this proof that the new nerd is here?
Yeah, I hope so. It's about time. Yep.
What do you think about the fact that Spider-Man, the biggest audience, the audience that carried it was women over 35?
I think that's amazing. I think the audience has always been here. It just hasn't been safe. And now you're in a place where it's like, fuck you. I like what I like, and I don't care if you're a sexist, misogynistic, xenophobic piece of shit. I'm gonna go out here and support and indulge myself in the things I enjoy. And you should either get along with it or go find something else to be mad at.
Well, one of the things that I really liked about this, and it ties back to my relation with Spider-Man, and one of the reasons I really like this Spider-Man, and one, I do think that this previous Spider-Man validates my belief that Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man. And since I don't want to be doing spoilers in this part particularly, I will say this, that when they do have the emotional moments for Tom Holland, he's very... like, the way that he portrays emotion, I feel, is really a way that Marvel's been working up, in a way of showing more and more vulnerable men, especially, that are closer to our age, really just be like the way that Tom Holland's Spider-Man cries, I think, is inherently more I don't know how to say it, but it's just more vulnerable. And I like that push that they're trying to do with it. And I think that overall, a lot of the sacrifices that you see this character go through, I think are very unconventional sacrifices. And I think that, well, it's not it's not really doing anything that's too adventurous or like really breaking incredible new ground. I do think that, one, the people that came out to see it is really awesome and shows that shift is happening. And two, the way that they're telling the story, I think, is allowing for that to continue to grow. A little Snelly, do you agree?
I very much agree, and I think that Andrew Garfield also showed emotion as Peter Parker in a very, very amazing way. But I think that the thing about Tom Holland's Peter Parker is that the movies and the franchise seem to remember that he's a kid, right? He's a high school boy who's going through all of these tragedies, and they don't try to shy away from that or make him seem older than he should. Like, this is his first huge thing. So I agree. I think that emotion is very, very well done in Tom Holland's Spider-Man.
Right. Right. All right, well, that will wrap it up for our deep dive this time on the great Demolition. We'll see how the demographics continue to shift as we see all these kind of movies dates shift around, and I guess we've come back in a year and take a look at this conversation and see where it's really shifted, and hopefully for the better. Hopefully that means that we get more comic book movies and we get catered to more. Maybe they'll treat us like we're rich boomers now. Ooh, wouldn't that be nice? Anyways, that will bring us to our next segment. Tonight we have our top Zen. Pairs perfectly with what we just talked about. Our top 10 favorite movie franchises of all times. We've got a mountain of favorite movies, favorite shows, favorite anything. But there's something about a franchise that just brings us in. With toys galore, generations of fans always coming in, and enough online theories to rebuild our movies all over again. Here is our top 10 movie franchises of all time. But first, Dandy, will you doodle that dilly? Dandy?